Judaism is one of the oldest monotheistic faiths in the world. With a history spanning approximately 4,000 years, it holds the distinction of being the first Abrahamic religion. Today, around 15,800,000 people worldwide identify with the Jewish faith, which accounts for only about 0.2% of the world's population. However, culturally, economically, and politically, Judaism itself has had a far greater impact throughout history. In this video, we will cover the fundamentals of Judaism. Yes, we have previously produced longer videos on this topic, but we wanted you to have a concise introductory video at hand as well. We also plan to create similar videos for other religions such as Christianity and Islam. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss them. Now, if we are ready, let's begin. To understand the origins of Judaism, we must journey back to the very ancient periods of history, for the roots of this faith go all the way back to the time of Abraham, Prophet Ibrahim. According to Jewish tradition, Abraham was born into a polytheistic, that is, pagan culture. Yet he adopted the belief in one God and made a covenant with him. According to this covenant, God blessed the descendants of Abraham and declared them to be his chosen people. The 12 sons of Jacob, who was Abraham's grandson and also called Israel, are regarded as the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. There's no need to list all their names in this video. However, those who are curious can watch our other video titled, "What Happened to the 12 Tribes of Israel?" Roughly 1,000 years after these events, the Jews appear as slaves in Egypt. Yet among them, one man refuses to submit to this situation and raises the banner of freedom against the Pharaoh. That man was none other than Moses, Prophet Musa, a descendant of Levi, one of Jacob's sons. This story is very familiar to all of us, isn't it? Moses challenges Pharaoh and ultimately parts the Red Sea, leading the Israelites out of Egypt. This episode, known as the Exodus, is one of the most important sections of the Torah, and there is a significant reason for that. After the Exodus from Egypt, Moses receives the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai. These 10 Commandments form the foundation of the Torah, the sacred book of the Jews. They also lay the groundwork for Jewish morality and law. In other words, through these commandments and the laws of the Torah delivered by Moses, the Israelites gained a common religious and legal identity. Therefore, the Exodus represents the process in which a people, liberated from slavery, became a nation and were shaped by divine law. After Moses, the Jews settled in the land of Canaan, the land that had been promised to them, and over time established a kingdom under Jewish rule. Especially during the reigns of King David and King Solomon, we can speak of a strong kingdom centered in Jerusalem. It was during this period that the first temple was built in Jerusalem by Solomon, making the city sacred for the Jewish people. However, this strong kingdom eventually began to weaken. The unity established by David and Solomon did not last long. The kingdom split into two, Israel in the north and Judah, Yehuda, in the south. From around 1000 BCE onward, the Jews came under the rule of various empires and were exiled from the land of Canaan. Among these exiles, the Babylonian exile occupies the most prominent place in Jewish collective memory. During this exile, the Jews incorporated elements from Mesopotamian religions into their own sacred texts. In fact, much of the Torah was written during this period. It was also in these years that the belief in a Savior, the Messiah, emerged, a belief that would later lay the foundations of Christianity. About 50 years after the exile, the Persian king Cyrus the Great allowed the Jews to return to the land of Canaan and rebuild their temple. However, in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, once again exiling the Jews. From then on, the Jewish people gradually dispersed across different parts of the world. The destruction of the temple also contributed to the formation of another cultural and religious transformation. Since there was no longer a central temple, Jews began to seek new forms of worship and community life. In short, when the central sanctuary ceased to exist, synagogues became the new focal points of Jewish worship. To better understand this process, you can watch our previous video titled The History of the Jewish Exile. After the exile, the Jews lived as minorities within different societies, ranging from Europe to the Middle East. Throughout the Middle Ages, they were frequently subjected to discrimination and oppression. In many European cities, special neighborhoods were established for them. The Italian origin word ghetto emerged in this very context. These medieval ghettos were mandatory residential areas for Jews. Their gates were locked at night, cutting them off from the outside world. Nevertheless, within these confined quarters, Jewish communities maintained their own religious and cultural life. By engaging in trades such as commerce and money lending, which were among the few professions permitted to them, they played an important role in the economy. In Eastern Europe, Jews developed the Ashkenazi culture and lived for centuries as relatively autonomous communities. However, in the 17th and 18th centuries, large-scale massacres in regions such as Ukraine and Poland began to threaten Jewish populations and culture severely. By the 19th century, under the rule of Tsarist Russia, widespread violence and persecution against Jews erupted. These attacks, known as pogroms, became frequent after 1881, especially in areas within the Pale of Settlement of the Russian Empire. As a result of these pogroms, hundreds of thousands of Eastern European Jews sought refuge through emigration. Some of them went to North and South America, where they laid the foundations of today's Jewish communities in those regions. Having briefly reviewed Jewish history up to the 20th century, we can now begin to examine the foundations of Jewish belief. At the center of Jewish tradition lies the belief in one single, indivisible God. According to this tradition, God is the creator of the universe, and it's absolute sovereign, omnipotent, just, and merciful. There exists a special covenant between God and the children of Israel. According to this covenant, the Jews, as God's chosen people, are obligated to fulfill His commandments and serve as an exemplary nation for the rest of the world. When it comes to the Holy Scriptures of the Jews, the first thing that comes to mind is the Torah. In fact, the Torah refers to the first 5 books of the larger collection known as the Tanakh, which Christians today call the Old Testament. The Torah thus includes the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Apart from the Torah, the Tanakh contains 2 additional sections, Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. These 2 parts primarily include the writings of prophets, poetry, and historical accounts. In addition to the written Torah, Judaism also preserves the tradition of the oral Torah. Around the 2nd century CE, this oral tradition was compiled into written form, resulting in the Mishnah, a codified collection of Jewish law. In the following centuries, numerous rabbis wrote commentaries and discussions on the Mishnah. These writings collectively formed another comprehensive work known as the Talmud. The first version of the Talmud was completed in the 3rd century Palestine, while the second and more extensive version, the Babylonian Talmud, was finalized in the 5th century CE. Alongside the Torah, the Mishnah, and the Talmud, other texts such as the Midrashic commentaries, Kabbalistic writings, and Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith also became important components of Jewish thought over time. Having briefly discussed the texts that shape Jewish belief, we can now move on to examining their daily worship and rituals. Among the daily prayers are the morning, noon, and evening prayers, as well as the blessings recited before and after meals, which are among the most common acts of devotion. Devout Jewish men, believing that the head should be covered in reverence, typically wear a head covering called a kippah, yarmulke. This symbolizes respect and the belief that God is always above them. For this reason, most synagogues and Jewish funeral homes always keep spare kippot available for those who need them. Jews also place on the doorposts of their homes a small case called a mezuzah, which contains parchment inscribed with passages from the Torah. When entering or leaving the house, they kiss the mezuzah, symbolically reminding themselves of God's commandments. Looking at the Jewish calendar, we see that the most sacred day of the week is the Sabbath, Shabbat. For Jews, Shabbat is a time of rest and sanctification, lasting from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. According to the Torah, God created the universe in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Therefore, Jews dedicate the 7th day to rest, refraining from creative or worldly work. On Friday evenings, families gather around the Shabbat table, reciting blessings over wine and bread. Orthodox Jews refrain from lighting fires, using electricity, driving, or shopping during this period. The goal is to withdraw from worldly concerns and focus on worship, family, and rest. On a yearly scale, Judaism also has a rich calendar of religious festivals and holy days. For instance, in March or April, Jews celebrate Passover, Pesach, commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. 7 weeks after Passover, they observe Shavuot, which commemorates the giving of the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, usually falls in September. According to Jewish belief, it marks the anniversary of the creation of the world and the beginning of a 10-day period of divine judgment and reflection. 10 days after Rosh Hashanah comes Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, considered the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. During the 25-hour period of Yom Kippur, devout Jews fast and abstain from all worldly activities. They pray in synagogues throughout the day, seeking forgiveness from God for the sins of the past year. Having examined the main elements of Jewish faith and worship, it is now time to take a brief look at modern Judaism and its cultural impact in the contemporary world. Today, Jews are divided into various denominations and movements. Among these, 3 main religious branches with the largest number of adherents can be identified. The first of these is Orthodox Judaism. This group represents the most traditional and strict interpretation of Judaism. They are known for their unwavering commitment to halakha, the body of Jewish religious law and tradition. For example, for many Orthodox Jews, not working, using electricity, or driving on the Sabbath is a fundamental rule. They also strictly adhere to kosher dietary laws. Men generally wear the kippah, and, in devout communities, gender distinctions in social and religious life are traditionally maintained. Orthodox Judaism itself is divided into several subgroups. For instance, Haredi Jews are considered the most conservative among the Orthodox. They strive to live a religious life detached from worldly affairs as much as possible. Hasidic Judaism, on the other hand, represents a more mystical and spiritually ecstatic form of orthodoxy. The second major branch is Reform Judaism. This movement emerged in 19th century Germany and gradually became widespread, especially in North America. It offers a more liberal interpretation of the faith. Reform Jews seek to live in harmony with modern conditions, allowing for much greater flexibility in worship and tradition. Within this movement, praying in local languages and mixed seating of men and women during services are common practices. Ethical and universal values are prioritized over rigid ritual observance. For example, among Reform Jews, the observance of Sabbath rules is left to individual conscience. All these aspects make Reform Judaism more open to assimilation, yet at the same time, it provides a more inclusive framework for preserving Jewish identity in the modern world. Today, a significant portion of American Jews identify themselves as affiliated with Reform traditions. Between these two movements lies a middle path, known as Conservative Judaism. Born in the late 19th century in the United States, this movement seeks to preserve traditional faith and halakhic law while also adapting to modern science and culture. Conservative Jews generally observe kosher and Sabbath laws, but their rabbis allow for certain flexibilities based on changing circumstances. For instance, women may take on more active roles in synagogue services, and prayers may be recited in local languages. Thus, the movement maintains a balanced approach between tradition and modernity. Apart from these three major branches, there are also smaller movements such as Reconstructionist Judaism and Humanistic Judaism. For example, humanistic Jews celebrate Jewish history and culture, but approach Judaism from a secular perspective, without centering belief in God. Despite all these denominational differences, many Jews today prefer to identify simply as Jewish, rather than belonging to a specific branch. In particular, a large portion of the Israeli population describes themselves not as religious but as secular or traditional. They may celebrate religious holidays as cultural traditions and maintain a sense of communal identity, while not strictly adhering to daily religious law. Currently, about half of the world's Jewish population lives in Israel, numbering approximately 7 million people. The second largest Jewish population resides in the United States, with about 5.5 million Jews. The rest of the Jewish population is spread across various regions of the world. Having explored Judaism and Jewish history in general, we have reached the end of this video. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have notifications turned on so that you don't miss our upcoming videos. See you in the next episode.